Hi, my name's Sandy. I'm a naturopath and acupuncturist, and I am a lecturer at Endeavour College of Natural Medicine. In this video, I'm going to be discussing the cultural aspects of the postpartum confinement period. And I really love this topic. I think it's super exciting. It's something that's kind of fresh in the literature to be looked at, but it's been taking place for hundreds of years. So, postpartum confinement is referring to a traditional practice that follows childbirth, and those who follow the custom typically immediately implement it straight after birth, and it can last. There's some variations in the length, but generally 7 days to 1 month. 1 month being the most common days found, up to 40 days with the Indian communities, and then 2 months to 100 days within some of the Middle Eastern cultures. So this postnatal recuperation period includes a lot of traditional health benefits. There's some taboos and some rituals that correspond with them. So the practice used to be known as lying in, which, as the term suggests, centers around bed rest. And there is, in some cultures, it's connected to taboos that concern an impurity that follows after childbirth. So it's been well documented throughout China, throughout Japan, Korea. In Korea, they call it recovery after birth. I can't pronounce the name, sorry, the Korean name for what they call it. In Latin America, they call it la cuarentena, which means 40 days or quarantine. So in India, it's called japa, which is translated to 5 weeks. So it's pretty interesting that there's all these little cultures that have their way of looking at it from their length perspective in their name. So with an overview, the postpartum confinement refers to both the mother and the baby. So baby is also staying at home with mum. Human newborns are actually so underdeveloped that a pediatrician named Harvey Karp has actually referred to the first 3 months of life as the 4th trimester. And I kind of love that. I really feel like it's important to really start implementing into kind of modern midwifery because there's a lot of health, basically the healthcare system for pregnancy, or what they call like a perinatal, is great. It's amazing, but there's not much support in that kind of 4th trimester period or postnatal. You do have some follow-ups with midwifery. Usually they'll come a couple of times in the first 6 weeks. However, that's about all the postnatal care you get. You're kind of disposed of. Here's a new baby, and learn the new skills yourself. So almost all countries actually have some form of maternity leave, and a lot of them have a paternity leave as well for the father. And there was one place in China I read that, I don't know what was going on in this era, but the mother was sent back to work and the father was to stay home with the newborn baby. And definitely there's cities that have accustomed to around the world from this in biblical times, in modern Greece. We've seen it noted in Europe, and I'll discuss some of the things that we've found throughout some of these cultures. So first of all, I wanted to talk about one meta-analysis that was a study that concluded there is little consistent evidence that the confinement practice actually reduces postpartum depression. So I had a little look at the study. 16 of these studies met the inclusion criteria. It was found that the role of the confinement in postpartum depression is quite complex. 8 studies concluded that it had a protective role. 4 that increased the risk of postpartum mood disturbances, and 4 studies had inconclusive findings. So when you look at aspects of some of these confinement practices, it could be contributing to the fact that there was diminished social support. So if you think about, hundreds of years ago, women weren't working, right? So you had your sisters, you had your mother-in-law, you had your mother, aunties, everyone was there to help you out. Now everyone works, so you're not only isolating yourself with a newborn baby so you're basically isolating yourself with a newborn baby, that's what I should say, rather than having like all this family around to support you. It can be actually very daunting. If you've gone from being kind of a career woman and then you stop work and you have a baby and your whole life has just changed around, so obviously there's going to be a lot of mood shifts that can come with that. There can be conflict of interest with mother-in-law and the tension experienced by modern women as they work to balance traditional with contemporary values. So very interesting to see that some of the stuff is coming through in the literature now and being looked at. So in China, it's called sitting the month. And the custom is actually documented far back as 1960, which, you know, it's pretty cool. It's referred to as the confinement, as women are advised to stay indoors for recovery from trauma of birth and feed the newborn baby. So aspects of the traditional Chinese medicine are included, with a special focus on eating foods considered to be nourishing for the body and to help with production of breast milk. Some parts of China actually barred visitors for 12 days, and they marked a celebration called 12 mornings, and that's when visitors could come on. So there was even like a confinement period where no visitors were allowed to come. So some everyday habits and personal hygiene practices. So during confinement, mothers are told that they do not expose their body to some physical agents such as cold weather and wind. And we see this from a TCM perspective to make a lot of sense. The pores are very open and you're very vulnerable to some of those invading pathogens. Vietnamese cultures also say no showering and no brushing your teeth in that confinement period. And a lot of the Vietnamese aspects have come from the Chinese. In Thailand, you're allowed to actually shower, but everything's got to be warm too. So in China, traditionally, there was actually no showering. And you've got to think of, if you come from like a low class and you don't have access to clean water, potential lesions down the perineum after childbirth, high risk of infection. Good idea to just leave dirty water away and also not brush your teeth and expose yourself to any potential bacteria. Your body's very vulnerable. So nowadays, however, new mothers can wash their hair and bathe or shower in the postpartum period, but it's important that they dry their body immediately afterwards with a clean towel and their hair is properly dried with a hairdryer. Some of the special foods, so definitely food comes into it as a huge influence through all the cultures. So mothers to choose, obviously, a real protein-rich, nourishing diet to help shrink the uterus and to help the perineal heal. And also foods that are going to be supportive for the breast milk. So sometimes mothers would be given special herbal foods, in particular like in broths and stuff like that, until they've actually passed and had all the discharges come out after birth. A very traditional meal was the pork knuckle with ginger and black vinegar. Pork knuckles are believed to help replenish calcium and blood build in Chinese medicine. Ginger is in a lot of the dishes, and we know it's very yang, it's very warming, it helps with wind accumulation. And meat-based soups and broths are also commonly consumed to help with the hydration and blood building. There's also the talk about a fish and papaya soup, which is considered to help a lot with breast milk production. So other East Asian countries like Thailand incorporate things like a Thai herbal steam massage, so using hot oils, warm oils I should say, and lots of different types of beautiful herbs are steamed, and actually they do like a stitz as well, so healing with the vagina, unless you've had a C-section, when they do not do these rituals until the month follows afterwards. I actually spent 4 years of my clinical practice in Thailand, so I was very interested in learning about confinement period. I was first exposed to it when I was studying acupuncture, and I worked in a Vietnamese restaurant, and one of the ladies there who was Vietnamese had a baby and she had to do all these things, and I was like, wow, never heard of this. So when I was obviously studying Chinese medicine, I looked into it a bit more. When I was living in Thailand, I asked around. I was working a lot with fertility and pregnancy throughout my practice, and although I had like Australian and European, there was many cultures around the world that were coming in and seeing me. So a lot of the Asians, I would really inquire about what they had to do, and they all had these beautiful little practices and rituals that they incorporated after having a baby, and I thought it was so nice. There was a lot of support also with the government in the Thai system. So I think you get someone sent to you. I can't remember the name. It's kind of like a doula here. Someone comes and kind of does these things to kind of care for you and look after you after childbirth, which is lovely. In the Indian subcontinent, there's the 40-day practice, special diet for facilitating the milk production. Sex is definitely not allowed. All the cultures have this, but there's a big emphasis on it in the Indian culture. And the father is also purified with a ritual bath before visiting the mother in confinement. In the event of a stillbirth in the Indian culture, then there would be a 24-hour impurity confinement period. And in Pakistan, it was for 5 weeks. So in Latin America, it's a 40-day practice once again, and a lot of immigrant communities are actually still practicing this in the United States, which is great to see. And some of those common things is a lot of a specific warm diet, keeping warm, staying home, resting up, learning to breastfeed. European cultures. So there was actually some maternity hospitals, for example, one called the General Lying-in Hospital in London. And a 1932 Canadian publication refers to lying in as ranging from 2 weeks to 2 months, discovered back in these days, which is pretty cool to think that, it was around and it was noted just back, over 100 years ago or something. So these weeks ended with the reintroduction of the mother to the community in the Christian ceremony of the churching of the woman. And special foods included a cordial, which is like a restorative drink, kind of like an eggnog. So it was like an eggy, milky drink. And later on it was turned into more like a gruel, so like a porridge kind of thing, which really fits into traditional Chinese medicine style of eating postpartum. So traditionally, like, women have been taken care of by their elders, their mother-in-law, their sisters, and their aunts. And so the lying-in hospitals are institutions that are starting to kind of replace some of these, caretakers that we don't have access to. So there's actually kind of a big business moving forward in China, where some residential facilities are actually being built. They're like a hotel now that you can actually book in for your confinement period. And they said that, they can obviously range from, just kind of a casual style to a very luxurious style, and up to the price of $27,000 for 1 month. So obviously, it's going to range in the care that you get. But there's definitely still traditional encouragement for postpartum restoration in most cultures throughout the world. Even New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Pacific Islands. So I've discussed with quite a few different cultures over the years to find out what they kind of do, and they all have those very similar traits. There's a lot of seafood consumed in some of those Pacific Island and like Papua New Guinea in the diet, and that's probably obviously a lot to do with what's available, what people have access to. So I have 2 children, and I did the confinement period with both my children, and I have to say it was probably one of the best times of my life, just doing nothing for an absolute month, and knowing that I had a whole month to just learn like how to be a mother, because there's nothing that can quite prepare you for it. Mastitis comes, there's lots of things that you can have problems with, you can have infections and fevers and whatnot, and if you've got plans on your calendar or whatever, this is going to throw you out and create stress for you and the baby. So the idea is to just have no expectations besides just learning how to do this new job that you've been thrown into and breastfeed. And if we look at the studies, sadly, a lot of the statistics show that, the rate of breastfeeding has reduced significantly by the 6-week mark, especially if there's been a C-section. So they've done studies with Siamese monkeys where they actually do what's called seeding. So C-section born monkeys, if they swab them with the vaginal bacteria, they actually can latch to the breast easier. If they don't have the swabbing and they're C-section born, then they don't have that latching take place as easy. And so these are some of the things that we can discuss with our clients and educate people on. My mother-in-law is African, so from the African kind of confinement period, they actually don't have men come and visit you in that first month in some of the African countries. And they definitely consume lots of warm cooked food. So my mother-in-law made me this kind of stewy thing up, which was consisting of lamb and I think beef bones, and some warm spices, nothing too hot, and lots of lentils and legumes in it. It was delicious and very nourishing. And every time I had it, I felt like my breast milk production just increased a lot. And there's sleep deprivation that come into it in that first month, so there's so much to adjust to. So if we can get women to just allow themselves to take this 1 month period to recover and also to heal and to learn how to get their head around this new phase of life, it's a really nice thing to be able to encourage people to do. Even if it's just take on a few of the common traits that are found, like having a warm diet and keeping nice and warm and not exposing yourself to any winds and drafts, you or the baby, while you breastfeed, and you build up that acquired immunity that comes only through birth and breastfeeding and getting those bacteria into your baby. That's how you seal their gut and build up their immunity. There's a lovely book called The First 40 Days. There's a great book called The Golden Month. So if you're interested, go and check them out. And there's definitely some publications that you can have access to if you're wanting to look at some of the studies around the confinement period. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you enjoyed this topic, and I definitely encourage you to look into it further. Hope you all have a nice day. Thanks, I'm Sandy. See you later.